My wife slept with my best friend and siphoned off $200, $0 from our joint account, then lied about everything until she claimed the house and inheritance. Now we're headed to court for everything she took. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy posting something like this, but here I am. You know that feeling when everything's fine one day and the next, your entire world flips upside down? Yeah, that's pretty much where I am right now. The craziest part, it all started with a gut feeling. Something just felt off with Lisa, my wife. We'd been together for 10 years, married for 5. We had a nice house, decent jobs, 2 kids, normal suburban life, you know. But I started noticing small things. Her phone buzzing more often, her being secretive about her texts, and her lying about where she was going. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she was stressed or just busy. But then I saw the messages, the ones she forgot to hide. It was late one night when I decided to check her phone after she went to bed. I know trust issues, but I was just curious. I found texts from someone named Mark, and the conversations weren't innocent. They were about sex, plans to meet up, and even some pretty explicit stuff. I saw pictures, naked pictures. My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe it. My wife cheating on me with my best friend. Mark had been over several times, and I never suspected a thing. I had always trusted Lisa completely, but there it was, clear as day. The worst part, they'd been doing it for months. I saw messages where she was bragging about how good Mark made her feel, how she loved the thrill, and how she was tired of pretending everything was fine at home. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All the time she said she was working late or going out with friends, it was all lies. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat there in the dark, staring at her phone, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I kept thinking, how could she do this? To me, to our family, to everything we built. I'd always been the stable one, the dependable guy. I worked hard, paid the bills, took care of the kids, and she was out screwing around with my best friend, Mark. I mean, what the hell? How do you even process that? It's like everything I believed in was a lie. The next morning, I decided I had to confront her. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. I woke her up early and I told her I knew about the affair. Her reaction, she looked at me like I was crazy. "You're overreacting," she snapped. "You're just jealous. Mark and I are just friends, you're imagining things." Yeah, right. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but she was trying to deny it all, like she thought she could just lie her way out of it. She started crying, saying I was paranoid, that I'd misunderstood, that Mark was just a friend she confided in about her stress. But I wasn't born yesterday. I knew what I saw, and I knew what it meant. I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak. How could she lie so easily? How could she betray me, our kids, everything we had? I thought about all the times she was cold or distant, and now I knew why. She'd been sneaking around behind my back, pretending everything was fine. It felt like I'd been punched in the chest, and honestly, I didn't even know what to do next. I wanted to scream, cry, break something, or maybe all of those at once. I realized I was not just betrayed, but also completely blindsided. I trusted her, I loved her, and now I was left with this huge hole in my chest. It was like a part of me had died that night. And that was just the beginning. After that confrontation, everything changed. I couldn't look at Lisa the same way. She kept insisting she was innocent, that Mark was just a friend who she'd confided in when she felt overwhelmed. She kept crying, saying she loved me, that she made a mistake, that she was sorry. Sorry doesn't even come close. Sorry doesn't fix the fact that she'd been lying to me for months, sneaking around, and screwing my best friend behind my back. I felt numb, like I was walking around in a fog. The trust I'd built over years was shattered in an instant. That day, I started digging deeper. I hired a private investigator to find out just how bad it was. I needed to see the full picture. Turns out the affair with Mark was just the beginning. They'd been having sex regularly, sometimes multiple times a week, at her office, at Mark's place, even in hotels. And that wasn't all. I discovered she siphoned off $200, $0 from our joint account over the past 6 months. I found bank statements hidden in her email drafts, transfers she'd made to secret accounts. She'd been draining our savings, planning to run away with Mark or maybe just to cover her expenses while she played the field. I was furious. That amount of money could have gone toward our kids' college funds, our mortgage, or even a decent vacation. Instead, she used it to fund her betrayal. When I confronted her with all this evidence, she lost her composure. Her lies got even more elaborate. She told me she'd only taken a little money, that she deserved a break, that she was just stressed and needed to feel alive again. She claimed Mark was just a rebound, that she didn't mean for it to get so out of control, but I knew better. I'd seen the texts, the receipts, the hotel bookings. She was lying through her teeth, and her excuses, they sounded pathetic. "You never paid attention to me anymore," she said. "You were always working, always busy. Mark was the only one who listened." Yeah, right, that's what they all say. The betrayal hurt worse than I expected. I was angry, yes, but also deeply sad. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs. Was I so blind? Did I really not see her slipping away? It's crazy how someone you love and trust can turn into a complete stranger overnight. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and honestly pretty lost. I spent nights awake, replaying everything, trying to understand how my wife, who I'd built a life with, could do this to me. I kept thinking about the kids, about how they'd be affected by all this mess. I wanted to lash out, to destroy something, but I knew that wouldn't fix anything. So I just sat there, stewing in my own anger and heartbreak. At this point, I knew there was no way back. The damage was done. I needed to decide what to do next. I couldn't stay in this marriage, not after all the lies and betrayal. But I also felt a strange urge to fight, to take everything from her that she'd stolen, not just the money but her dignity too. I decided I'd gather all the evidence, consult a lawyer, and prepare for the worst. I wanted her to feel the pain she'd caused me, to see her lose everything she thought she was entitled to. That's when I realized I wasn't just angry, I was determined. I'd make sure she paid for what she did, one way or another. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I was done being the nice guy. This was personal now. Over the next few days, I threw myself into gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I went through bank statements, emails, her phone, everything. I needed to be thorough, because I knew Lisa was the kind of person who would spin a story to cover her ass. And sure enough, she started doing just that. She began calling me paranoid, saying I was making things up, that I was overreacting. She told our friends I'd lost my mind, that I was jealous and insecure. It was infuriating hearing her lie so effortlessly, like she was convinced she could talk her way out of it. Meanwhile, she kept up her act of being the hurt wife, crying and saying she loved me, that she'd never do anything to hurt her family. But her words felt hollow. I saw her for what she was, a manipulator, a liar, a thief. She'd taken our money, our trust, and now she was trying to spin it as if I was the one causing the problem. I didn't want to be that guy who just stormed out and abandoned everything, but honestly, I was close. Every day, the anger grew stronger. I kept asking myself, how deep does this rabbit hole go? Was there more I didn't see? How many lies had she told over the years? I decided I needed legal advice. I reached out to a divorce lawyer who specialized in financial betrayal cases. Sitting in his office, I laid out everything I'd uncovered. He looked at me with a serious expression and said, "You've got a strong case for financial misconduct, and if you want to pursue this, you need to prepare for a long fight. She's probably trying to hide assets and manipulate the situation. Your best bet is to get a court order for financial disclosure and start building your case." Hearing that, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief because I finally had someone who understood what I was going through, and dread because I knew it was only going to get uglier from here. While I was dealing with the legal stuff, Lisa's behavior didn't improve. She doubled down on her lies, claiming she was trying to fix things, but I could see through her. She was still sneaking around, still lying about her whereabouts. I caught her in little inconsistencies, an extra phone she'd hide, a new bank account she'd opened without telling me. She kept insisting I was paranoid, that I had trust issues, but I knew the truth. I knew she'd been screwing me over for months, maybe longer. And Mark, he was still in the picture, texting her, calling her, making her feel like she was the center of the universe. That's when I decided I had to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't just sit around waiting for the court to decide. I started planning my next move, how to expose her fully, how to make her feel the loss she'd inflicted on me. I wanted her to understand what it felt like to be betrayed, to be played for a fool. I knew I couldn't undo what had been done, but I could make her pay in some way. I began to think about how to turn her own lies against her, how to reveal the truth to everyone, including the kids, without losing my mind. It was a dark time, but I told myself I'd get through it. I had to. For me, for my kids, and for the piece of myself that still believed in justice. I kept telling myself that I'd come out on the other side of this, stronger and wiser. But right now, all I felt was rage and heartbreak. I kept replaying that night I found out, the look on her face when she lied to me, and the realization that everything I thought I knew was a lie. I knew I had to be careful, though. Lisa was manipulative, and I couldn't let her spin her way out of this. I had to stay calm, stay focused, and make sure I had everything in order before I made my move. The worst part, knowing that this isn't just about money or betrayal, it's about trust. And I don't know if I'll ever trust her again after this. In the days that followed, I started feeling like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every time I thought I had a handle on the situation, something new would come up. Lisa's lies grew more desperate, more frantic. She'd pretend to be innocent, cry crocodile tears, and then turn around and accuse me of trying to ruin her. She tell anyone who would listen that I was crazy, that I was possessive, and that she was the victim here. Honestly, I didn't care what anyone thought anymore. I knew the truth, and that was all that mattered. I kept digging into her financial mess. I hired a forensic accountant to trace the money she'd siphoned off. Turns out, she transferred chunks of our savings into offshore accounts, hidden in places I'd never heard of. She'd also made multiple large cash withdrawals, probably to keep her moves secret. I was furious. All those years I worked my ass off to provide a stable life, and she was just using it as her personal ATM. The thought of her living a double life, lying to my face while draining our bank account, made my blood boil. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we built? Meanwhile, she kept spinning her lies. She told our friends she was under a lot of stress, that I was controlling, that she was just trying to find herself again. She painted herself as the victim, the one who was wronged. That made me sick. I knew she was lying, but I also knew I had to be strategic. If I wanted to expose her properly, I had to gather proof that couldn't be denied. I started recording her conversations when I could, saving texts and emails, even secretly installing a camera in the living room where she often met Mark. I didn't want to be a paranoid psycho, but I also knew I had to protect myself and my kids from her manipulations. One night, I finally caught her in a lie that I knew would be the nail in her coffin. She told me she was at her sister's house, visiting family. But I matched her location with the GPS data from her phone. She was in Mark's driveway. I felt a wave of rage and disgust. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I couldn't let her keep spinning her web of lies. I was going to fight back, not just for the money, but for my dignity. I sat her down the next day and showed her everything I'd uncovered. The bank transfers, the offshore accounts, the GPS data. Her face went pale and she started stammering, trying to deny it all. Her reaction was a mix of anger, denial, and desperation. She told me I was crazy, that I was paranoid, and that I was ruining our family. But I wasn't listening anymore. I knew her game. I saw her for what she was, a manipulative, selfish woman who had used me and our family for her own pleasure and greed. I was done being a victim. I told her I was going to take her to court, that I was going to make sure she paid for what she'd done. I felt a strange sense of clarity. This was no longer about love or trust. It was about justice. It was about making her face the consequences of her actions. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying everything, the lies, the betrayal, the theft. I kept asking myself how I'd allowed this to happen, how I'd missed all the signs. I felt broken but also determined. I knew I had to rebuild not just my marriage but myself. I couldn't let her destroy me entirely. I started planning my next steps, legal action, telling the kids, figuring out how to start over. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I'd come out of this stronger. I had to. For my own sanity, for my kids, and for whatever shred of dignity I had left. The worst part, knowing that I'd never trust her again, no matter how this ended. That trust was gone, and all I could do now was fight to reclaim what was mine. The legal process took longer than I expected, but I was prepared for a battle. I spent hours poring over documents, working with my lawyer to build a case that would expose Lisa's deception and financial misconduct. We filed for full disclosure of her assets, and I made it clear I wasn't going to let her get away with hiding anything. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior became even more erratic. She started threatening me, saying I was trying to ruin her reputation, that I was jealous and insecure. She accused me of trying to control everything, which honestly made me laugh bitterly. Control. After she'd been controlling the whole situation with her lies and secret accounts, please. She continued to deny everything, even as I presented her with tangible proof. She insisted she was innocent, that she'd only taken a little money, and that Mark was just a friend. That's when I decided to confront her directly in front of our lawyer and the court. I told her I had enough of her lies, that I'd seen the evidence, and that I knew the truth. Her face twisted in anger, and she spat out that I was ruining her life. She said I was possessive and jealous, like I was the one at fault, but I wasn't buying her act anymore. I'd seen her in her worst moments, and I knew she was a liar and a thief. The worst part was the emotional toll. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and deeply hurt. I'd always believed in marriage, in loyalty, in the vows we took. But Lisa had shattered all of that, and now I was left picking up the pieces. I kept thinking about the years I'd spent trying to make things work, only to find out she'd been screwing around and stealing from us all along. It was like discovering that your whole life was built on a lie. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. I honestly wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. The pain was so raw, so real, that sometimes I just wanted to disappear. But I knew I had to stay strong for me, for the kids. I couldn't let her win by breaking me down completely. I started focusing on my own healing, seeing a counselor to deal with the emotional fallout. I also began preparing for the court. Hearings, gathering more evidence, and making sure I had everything in order. I could see that the wheels of justice were turning, and I was determined to get what was fair. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, not just financially, but morally. How could she sleep at night knowing she'd lied, cheated, and stolen from her own family? That question haunted me, but I refused to let it consume me. One thing I learned through all this is that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who people truly are. Lisa's true colors shone brighter than ever, and I realized I'd been blind for a long time. Trust is fragile, and I won't be giving mine away so easily again. I also learned that sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure the truth comes out and that the guilty face the consequences. I still have a long road ahead, and I don't know exactly how things will turn out, but I do know one thing. I'm not going to let her steal my peace or my future. I'll rebuild, I'll recover, and I'll come out of this stronger than I ever thought possible. The court date finally arrived, and I knew this was the moment everything would either fall into place or spiral further out of control. I sat there in the courtroom, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and resolve. Lisa sat across from me, her face flushed with anger and frustration. She kept insisting she was the victim, that I was trying to ruin her life, but I had all the proof, every bank transfer, every secret account, every lie. My lawyer presented everything meticulously. The judge listened carefully, asking pointed questions, and I saw Lisa's composure crack a little under the weight of the evidence. As the proceedings went on, it became clear that Lisa's lies couldn't hold up. The judge ordered full financial disclosures, froze some of her accounts, and set a timeline for dividing assets. I felt a strange sense of relief. Justice was finally starting to take shape. But underneath that, I was still carrying the emotional scars. The betrayal had cut so deep, I wondered if I'd ever fully heal. Still, I knew I had to move forward. I'd fought hard to reclaim what was mine, and I had to focus on rebuilding my life piece by piece. After the court session, I met with my kids. They were too young to understand everything, but I explained that Mommy and Daddy were going to be living separately for a while. I promised to be there for them no matter what, and I could see the relief in their eyes. They didn't need to know all the details, but I wanted them to feel safe and loved. That moment reinforced my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for money or justice anymore. I was fighting for my family's future, for their stability and happiness. In the weeks that followed, Lisa's hold on the situation loosened. She tried to spin things her way, but the evidence was too overwhelming. She moved out of the house, leaving behind a trail of lies and broken trust. I focused on my recovery, reconnecting with friends and family who supported me through the chaos. I started therapy to deal with the emotional trauma, and I took up new hobbies to rebuild my sense of self. Slowly, I was learning to breathe again, to find peace in the aftermath of the storm. Looking back, I realize I've learned a lot from all this. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can come from the people you least expect. But I also learned that no matter how deep the pain, you can come out the other side. Justice might take time, but it's worth fighting for. I wish I could say I've completely moved on, but I know I'll carry the scars of this betrayal forever. Still, I refuse to let it define me. I've started rebuilding my life, stronger and more aware of what's truly important. And if there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, never ignore the signs, trust your instincts, and don't let anyone steal your peace. Because in the end, the only person who can truly protect your happiness is yourself.